I spent the last few months playing every form of PvP, including brackets you already know and play, and PvP experiences you don't even know exist, like roleplay PvP on Moonguard. But trust me, it's not what you expect. But why did I do this? Do you experience burnout from PvP or find yourself tuning out of the expansion? I think the quickest remedy is to try and play a different game mode. It's funny to me that a lot of hardcore PvPers will get bored and will swap over to Mythic Plus, or even worse, League of Legends, when there are tons of PvP brackets that they're probably ignoring, and many of them are at least worth checking out. Today we'll discuss everything from the brackets that I think everyone should play, all the way down to the game mode that is so fundamentally broken that I think Blizzard needs to change it entirely. There will even be a wildcard category of some very weird forms of PvP that you're probably overlooking. And just to be clear, these are just my opinions, and even if I dunk on the game mode you enjoy the most, that doesn't mean you should stop playing it. Whatever works for you works for you. But I want to start with the brackets that I think are the must-plays. In no particular order, they include Solo Shuffle, BG Blitz, 2v2, and pre-made Battlegrounds of all things. And I'll be very specific what I mean by pre-made in just a second. And I'm not saying you need to play them all, but I think you should always include at least one of these brackets as a part of your balanced PvP diet. If I had to guess, a lot of you out there are probably already playing one or more of these already, so I don't want to waste too much time in this section. Solo Shuffle is the most popular arena bracket by far, with millions of rounds being played each week. Of course, it has its problems like long queue times for DPS, imbalanced lobbies, and healer MMR, but being able to solo queue a ranked game mode should not be taken for granted, especially since we've been waiting such a long time for something like this to exist. If you're a returning player who has arena experience in the past, Solo Shuffle will definitely scratch that itch for PvP, especially if you can't find partners to regularly queue with. BG Blitz is also a must-play in my opinion because it fixes a lot of the core issues you would run into by solo queuing random battlegrounds. You don't have to worry about pre-mades, and the map rules are just 10 times better. From faster mount speeds to better power-ups and more, I really think the BG Blitz should be the #1 competitive bracket for casual players, even ones who are nervous about ranked PvP. And yes, I know that BG Blitz has issues too, and the individual impact you can have on each game will depend a lot on your class, but overall most specs are at least somewhat viable. Now you might be wondering why I decided to include 2v2 on my list of must-plays over 3v3, and we'll be talking about some of the problems with 3v3 later, but for now I want to talk about why I think the choose bracket is underrated and misunderstood. For all of you fellow boomers out there, you'll remember a time where 2v2 was equally as prestigious as 3v3. It wasn't until Gladiator and Rank 1 titles were stripped away from the bracket that many people stopped taking 2v2 seriously, and this belief has carried on to today. Just do a quick search for 2v2 on the WoW forums, you'll be met by players who say the bracket is an imbalanced fiesta, enjoyed only by the most fiendish characters in the game. And I'll be honest for a second, yes, 2v2 does definitely have some balancing issues. There are a ton of matchups that are practically unwinnable by design, and if you've ever played something like a Destro Warlock into a BM Hunter, you know exactly what I mean. But the reality is that every bracket has some balancing issues. Just look at Venruki here in his mage getting paired against not one, not two, but 3 BM Hunters in Solo Shuffle. It's no wonder that he screamed in celebration after managing to get just one single win.
Thank you! Thank you! God, bro.
And in my opinion, the last must-play for PvP is 5-man pre-made BGs. Now, I know a lot of you out there are probably rolling your eyes and thinking that skill cap probably fell off now that they're talking about random BGs, and I was just like you a few months ago, someone who thought that real PvPers only do arena. But I recently started doing 5-mans with my roleplay guild on Moonguard, which I'll talk about later, and it made me feel very nostalgic. Because when I started playing WoW, BGs were the main form of content, and even during TBC, I was still doing BGs for fun with my guild. Obviously, random BGs have always been a bit of a shit show. You're somehow expected to have cohesion with complete noobs, whiny forum posters, and probably a few bots, while potentially fighting against gladiator level players, or some crazy organized pre-made led by some dude with over 4k honor level, which is not a joke by the way. I always run into this dragon who literally has 4k honor level.
How do you kill that which has no life?
Because of this, I wouldn't advise solo queuing BGs at all if you can get around it. Playing with 5-man pre-made keeps most games fairly competitive, especially in the event that you run into another pre-made. And yeah, you could just queue BG Blitz, but I promise you it's fun to just play for pride and not for PvP rating every now and then. Anyway, I think every PvPer should be playing at least one of these 4 game modes regularly, and once again, these are just my own opinion. The beautiful thing about WoW is that it's truly a sandbox game, and you can shape your experience however you want. If you're coming back to WoW after an extended break or looking to grind on a new alt, we've rolled out brand new updates to all of our class courses at skillcap.com, which teach you everything you need to know to hit your goals fast. Instead of overcomplicating things with advice that doesn't work for everyone, we focus on teaching WoW from your perspective with tips that actually make you a better player. That's why our class guides continue to be the most effective way to learn any spec for PvP. Trust me, they actually work, and I use them myself as someone who works for Silca. After this video, be sure to check out the special discount link below to learn more about every service we offer and how you can gain 400 rating risk-free. For now, let's get back to the video. Now I want to talk about the 2 brackets I think you should try at least once, and I'm going to start with a very hot take, 3v3. Now I know what you're thinking, how could you possibly not call 3v3 a must-play? And I totally get it, 3v3 is de facto the most prestigious bracket thanks to the coveted Gladiator and Rank 1 titles. Also the fact that it's been the main WoW esport for almost 20 years. And if I was making this same video back in any expansion before Dragonflight, I would say 3v3 would be a definite must-play. These days though, I think that the 3s bracket is exceptionally hard to get into, especially for new players, but even for established players too. And I recently asked Fenruki how hard it would be for him to find good 3v3 queues on a scale of 1 to 10, and his response was 6 or 7. That's right, a multi-rank 1 BlizzCon champion who is arguably the face of PvP finds it difficult to find 3v3 queues in 2025. So if you're an average player, good luck finding a stable team. If Blizzard ever changes the archaic mess that is the LFG system, my opinion might change, but with the existence of Solo Shuffle and with 2v2 being the more accessible arena bracket, I don't think 3v3 is an essential PvP experience these days. But at the end of the day, it's something worth trying out if you get the chance. Who knows, you might end up like Erratic here who achieved Gladiator for the first time this expansion. The only other PvP mode that I think more players should try out is the rotating PvP brawls. I'll admit that I personally have ignored most brawls with the exception of Comp Stomp, but these are definitely a step up from solo queuing random BGs. And again, they're a bit of a show, but at least you get some variation on the standard PvP experience, and that's really all I have to say. If you're ever bored, check out the brawls because you just might like them. So at this point, we have my list of the best PvP modes in 2025, the ones that I think most serious players should focus on playing if they're wanting a balance of achievement, improvement, and fun. But now I want to visit the other side of PvP with the brackets I would personally offer a soft pass. And by soft pass, I mean that these are game modes that you can safely ignore and have a completely satisfying PvP experience. And a lot of these will fall into the casual category, which doesn't mean I'm trying to hate on casual players, but I think they're just much better options even for beginners. I'm putting World PvP in this category first because it has some very annoying problems. And when I say World PvP, I'm talking about something other than doing weekly Sparks quests, because to me, even though that's technically open world PvP, it's basically just like doing homework. Instead, what I'm referring to is flying around and trying to find open world skirmishes. Now, Blizzard has made an attempt to spice this up by adding a bounty system, which puts an icon on the map for any high value targets. Bounties are fine on paper until you consider the fact that shards exist. In case you didn't know, servers are divided into layers, which means you might not even see the bounty on your map, and the person who has bounty can just log off to remove it. And if you happen to be the bounty, there's a chance you'll be absolutely dogpiled on by a crate farming group. And to be clear, I don't consider crate farming to be PvP content at all. And speaking of content, Midnight will introduce a new outdoor PvP zone that is supposed to be reminiscent of Ashran, which in case you didn't know is now classified as an epic BG, which is another game mode I'll be soft passing on. To me, what made Alterac Valley so enjoyable back in the day was the fact that it was a little bit disorganized and, people took it seriously but not too seriously. But today, there's this thing called group syncing, which means there are groups of players who sync their queues in epic BG, which means getting an entire 40-man team of organized players. Call me a hater, but this is not PvP. Blizzard seems to agree, which is why they've started to crack down on this problem that has plagued casual PvP for ages. And I'm also going to give a soft pass to solo queuing random BGs. I already mentioned earlier that queuing with a 5-man group is infinitely more enjoyable, and maybe I'm just a doomer, but once permanent Comp Stomp comes out in Midnight, I really think random BGs are going to tank in popularity. I also see a similar fate for skirmishes, which I'll also pass on as a primary form of PvP content. While skirmishes have their place in the game, maybe for newer players, there's almost no need to play them outside of completing weekly quests. And even if you are a beginner, skirmishes can be an absolute disaster since it suffers the same BG problem where there's a chance you'll be matched against the sweatiest and most geared players imaginable. The final PvP mode I'll pass on is one that actually breaks my heart to say it, and it's dueling. I used to be a massive Duratar hero in PvP, and back in Wrath and Kata, I spent a lot of time dueling outside capital cities. And for anyone who was PvPing during this time, you already know that duels were such an iconic part of PvP, being featured in the biggest videos at the time. Hell, even Skill-Cap was even making dueling guides for multiple expansions. And we even have an hour-long Classic WoW Mage v Rogue dueling guide on this very channel if you're interested in seeing one of the most overproduced videos we've ever made. Anyway, as much as it pains me to say it, dueling has really fallen off over the years, and it's 100% Blizzard's fault. Because of things like power creep to mobility, self-healing, cooldowns, and so on, dueling lost a lot of the slower and methodical decision-making that actually made it more enjoyable back in the day. While there are dueling tournaments that pop up from time to time, I really can't help but feel that dueling has lost most of its prestige over the years. But there's one final bracket I'm including on this list, and unfortunately it's going to be a hard pass for me. Ever since the introduction of BG Blitz, rated Battleground participation has absolutely plummeted, with less than 100 games being played per day on NA. If finding a group for 3v3 is hard, finding one for RBGs is nearly impossible, which is why it's the bracket that I think most players can and probably should pass on in 2025. And once again, don't get me wrong, I used to love RBGs, and I understand why some people would be frustrated at BG Blitz for killing the bracket. But at this point, I really see no point in playing RBGs unless you can consistently convince 9 other people to do so multiple times per week, which probably isn't happening for most players. But now it's time to get a little bit weird with some truly obscure ways to enjoy PvP. I'm going to start by taking a trip to Moonguard, which is North America's biggest roleplay server. Now, I'm sure a lot of you out there heard some crazy things about Moonguard, especially the infamous Goldshire Inn, but playing on Moonguard and deciding to hang out with Elwyn Forest is like going to Disneyland just to stand around a single dumpster. It's just pretty much trash. Moonguard is definitely a very weird place though, filled with people walking around Stormwind like they're NPCs, even having these special profiles for themselves using an add-on called Total Roleplay. On Moonguard, you can basically be anything. And it was actually on this server that I joined an RP PvP guild called the Divine Inquisition, who's filled with players who worship the light and who wish to get rid of every heathen that plagues Azeroth, especially Volpera. Sorry, Kenny. But there's also players on Moonguard who roleplay as guards and thieves, and there's even this guy who spends his time running around Stormwind pretending to be a horse. I'm not joking, by the way. Moonguard is the best and weirdest server I have ever played on. And this is coming from someone who has played on every major PvP hub for the past 15 years, including Tychondrius, Kel'Thuzad, Darkspear, Mal'Ganis. Unlike these other PvP servers where most people are AFK in Dornogal, Moonguard makes WoW feel more alive, especially as a PvPer. Roleplay PvP is kind of hard to define because it's a twist on other forms of PvP. To an RPer, a duel isn't just a silly skirmish, but a fight to the death. On Moonguard, you're doing everything for pride, and there are tons of wacky rituals. For instance, whenever my guild wants to kick someone, they don't simply type /gkick. No, they take the person to Nagran Arena, put them on trial, and then execute them for everyone to see. The first time I saw this, all I could think was, what the f***? World PvP is also dramatically turned up a notch on RP servers since every guild seems to have a massive rivalry with everyone else. Trust me, it gets really ugly. And I'm relatively new to RP PvP, and while it's something I really enjoy, it's definitely not for everyone. RP servers have a bunch of hidden rules that are hard to navigate, and it's like being on vacation in a place you've never been to before, where people speak a language you're not really fluent in. And another really obscure form of PvP is low-level BGs, which are often called which is a word I'm not sure I can actually say on YouTube. Anyway, if you've been playing for WoW for a while, you're already familiar with It involves taking a character and locking their XP at a lower level, most commonly level 19, and then queuing random BGs and even skirmishes. Every expansion, there are thousands of players who do this, belonging to a community that has existed since vanilla. Now, not to brag too much, but I was actually part of the biggest level 19 Warsong Gulch tournament of all time in 2015, with a prize pool of nearly $10,000. My team wound up winning the grand finals thanks to us absolutely smashing MVQ, which was pretty cool. And before you write it off as being easy or gimmicky, trust me, it's definitely not. Many of the best level 19s are actually rank 1 gladiators and RBGers, and there's even some players who've competed in the AWC. Even though there are less abilities in these lower brackets, there's definitely a lot of skill expression, and you learn that a lot of small things like positioning can have a huge impact on your performance in PvP. The main issue with playing low-level BGs right now is most of the action is currently happening on classic servers, with Mists of Pandaria being the current hotspot for level 19s. And speaking of MoP Classic, I want to talk about classic PvP in general. This is one of the most polarizing topics when it comes to PvP, with people either insisting that classic expansions are god-tier goated, or other people who think that they're a complete waste of time. And I kind of understand where both perspectives are coming from. For one, TBC, Wrath, Kata, and Mop were really good times to be PvPers. During this era, the game felt larger than life, with some of the most iconic players in PvP history becoming icons for years to come during this era. It was honestly just a badass time to be a PvPer, and the nostalgia is definitely real. But to me, Classic WoW is a different game than the classic expansions we all played over a decade ago. To me, Classic feels like players collectively went to ChatGPT and asked how to play the game, with the final result feeling somewhat robotic, including a culture obsessed with the meta and min-maxing. Just look at the entire concept of booning from Classic Vanilla. That ain't Classic, bro. Ironically, I think Mop Classic is best for people who did not play during that era, and that sounds really weird for me to say. One thing that made old expansions so nostalgic was because of how messy and weird they were at the time, and how there was a steady progression between seasons, and how new tech was constantly being discovered. Don't get me wrong, I understand why people are having fun on Mop, I really do, but I don't think it's an essential PvP experience for most players. Again though, I want to stress that these rankings are just my own. There's obviously a ton of ways to play WoW PvP these days, and it can be hard to know how to budget your time. That's why we have Retail, Classic, and Mythic Plus all bundled under one subscription, which also includes League and Valorant, by the way. And honestly, right now is such a really good time to join Skillcap because we have so many amazing benefits, including the brand new updates to all of our class courses, and new features included in the Skillcap UI, which I personally use, especially to help me gear my ults thanks to the BIS feature. If you're interested in signing up and helping me out, just use the special discount link below. For now, I want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.